Hey everybody, hope you all are doing well and welcome back to Michael's Matter. And I, of course, am Michael. And today, as we are just a few days away from the midterm elections, the debate about what to do with retirement benefits, so things like Social Security and Medicare, is getting put into high gear as both Republicans and Democrats are both trying to present their fixes to the system that supports, around 63 million plus American seniors and retirees every single year. The program itself has a budget of $1.7 trillion, and this includes programs like Social Security Retirement, Social Security Disability, so SSDI, Supplemental Security Income, SSI, as well as the Railroad Retirement and VA benefits. Now, each of the parties, they have their own kind of values and perspectives and solutions with how they would try to fix it. And it's really getting messy right now, trying to figure out which avenue could eventually be the best with the least amount of pain. Even Democratic heavyweights like President Obama, as well as President Clinton and, of course, President Biden, are coming out of the gate tossing around attacks pointed at Republicans to present them as hell-bent on cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits just purely for the sake of doing it. While Republicans, like Republican House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, are making it pretty easy to point their dirty end of the stick at them, as they want to make changes to Social Security that will affect people's ability to qualify. So this means things like raising the minimum retirement age to 70, or even other Republicans who have thrown around the idea of having to renew Social Security every 5 or even 1 year, potentially putting all those programs at jeopardy every single year. So today, we are going to try to make heads and tails of these arguments and their proposals and see if any of the options would actually even salvage the Social Security program and prevent those bad old days of America when nearly half of all seniors lived in poverty once they were either too old or too ill to continue to work. Now, this is Michael's Matters, and before we get to it, if you like these videos, if you find them interesting, if you find them helpful, or if you at least find them useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when our newest and most informative videos come out. All right, let's get down to it. So this week, Democrats, including current President Biden, former President Obama, and hey, even President Clinton, were getting out there to stump for Democrats who are, I guess to put it nicely, maybe not going to have as easy of a go at it this midterm elections as they had initially hoped. President Obama was hammering Republicans for both floating the idea of making cuts to the beloved Social Security program, and then moreover, to add insult to injury, to plan to use those cuts as a leveraging point in a debt cap fight that is looming with Democrats in the not-so-distant future. U.S. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, who stands to become the Speaker of the House, that is, of course, if Republicans win, has already said that he will likely leverage the debt limits for reductions in federal spending. This would essentially take money from programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Although he didn't specifically say which programs, we know that it would probably be at least one or all of these programs that would have cuts focused on them. Some of the other cuts that have been bandied about would be to raise the full retirement age to 70 years old. Now, right now, depending on when you were born, it ranges from 65 years old all the way up to 67 years old if you were born in 1960 or later. Other options, like suggested by Senator Rick Scott out of Florida, a Republican, is to put the program, that is Social Security, up for a renewal vote between every 1 to 5 years to allow for renegotiations and changing, along with a more far-fetched idea from earlier this year to tie retirement age to life expectancy, or even making benefits relied on means tested, meaning if you have money or assets, you may not even get the full Social Security benefit that you paid into. Now, most of these changes, at least spiritually, they feel real disingenuous from what the intent or what the program has become and what it does now. Politicians at various levels right now are duking it out to get reelected, as everywhere from the district comptroller to senators, at least it seems obvious what's going on here. First is that there's a midterm election that is happening next week, if you weren't aware. I bring that up kind of only half jokingly for a couple reasons. Primarily because midterms, well, they never get the glitz, the glamour, or all that attention that presidential elections get. They are essentially the playoffs to the presidential campaign Super Bowl. As an example of this, according to Pew Research, in the 2020 general election, around 158.4 million Americans voted, which represents about 62.8% of the voting age at that time, if we're using the U.S. Census Bureau estimates. Inversely, in 2018 midterm elections, which was a super popular midterm election for midterm standards, 53.4% of the voting age Americans ended up going to the poll. By the way, this still puts us in the lower mid-range of all modern voting countries, basically right below Greece and right above Colombia, but hey, we're still beating out the UK. Anyways, I digress. So what we see generally in midterm elections is the average age of voters is actually much, much higher. So, for example, in 2018's midterm elections, voters between the ages of 45 and 64, they turned out at 59.5% of eligible voters. For folks who are 65 plus, it went all the way up to 66.1%, which is the highest of all the groups that are being measured. Now, on the opposite side, voters who were 18 to 29, well, they showed up at 35.6%. Or 30 to 44 years old, they showed up at 48.8%. So my suspicion is that in this midterm, that has a higher proportion of older Americans and also a higher number of older Americans who are going to be active in the voting process, it totally makes sense that for both Democrats as well as Republicans to lean into issues that many older Americans are most concerned about, and in this case, particularly retirement, Social Security, as well as Medicare. So it's no secret that Social Security is having issues, at least in the near term. The long and the short of both Republicans and Democrats' perspective on how to strengthen Medicare is the fundamental difference between their perspectives on governments as a whole. Republicans believe that Social Security has become a bloated, wasteful, Hobbesian leviathan that will just continue to expand its cost until it collapses. So they believe that bringing it back to its original objective of just helping very specific older Americans and those unable to work is the right way to preserve it. So it makes sense why Senator Ron Johnson, as well as others, have proposed making the Social Security program come up for a vote between 5 and every 1 year, in the case of Rick Scott. This would be so that the program equivalent of resto-modding can be done, where parts that were designed in previous generations that are maybe broken or no longer necessary or perhaps obsolete and costing money can be fixed or swapped out before, they essentially sink the whole program. I mean, even the Social Security trustees have said that by 2035, the program at its current rate would only be able to sustain about 78% of current benefit obligations that it has. In the Republican philosophy, this means that there will need to be painful cuts now to extend the program, which obviously are not particularly popular, especially in the midterm election when a lot of the folks voting are near or around or above or utilizing those Social Security benefits. Things like extending the age of eligibility, tightening disability guidelines, or putting income limits on who can qualify are all things that they seem to be on the table for Republicans. Raising the eligibility age to 70 is probably the easiest one for Republicans to tout because with a higher eligibility age, as mortality cuts into the number of people who make it to their retirement age, it puts a bit of ease on the system as a whole. But it also has, I'm not going to call it a benefit, maybe not even a feature, we'll just call it an attribute, where it doesn't limit those folks who are paying into it while they are still young and working, but it does cut out those folks who are older and don't make it to those older ages. Ultimately, moving the full retirement age to 70 would be essentially cutting overall benefits from the program for all ages, for all people moving forward by 23%, assuming somebody lives to the same age and length of time. Now, Democrats on the other side, like President Joe Biden, had said in no uncertain terms, quote unquote, I will protect these programs and I'll make them stronger, end quote, referring to Social Security and Medicare that was last week. In fact, what it seems like they plan to do is doing the opposite of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but rather they want to have all the inefficient and the brackish water left over in the tub and then even add some more to it because it will help the program limp along just for a couple more years, but without any additional funding would cause the program to collapse under its own weight. It is this exact ostrich strategy that has gotten us to this pound of cure stage rather than the ounce of prevention that we could have done generations ago. Now, to be fair, to their point, Social Security as a program as a whole has done a great job of lifting elderly people out of poverty. According to the Center on Budget and Public Priorities, or CBPP, 22,457,000 people have been lifted out of poverty just in 2020, including children, adults, as well as older adults over the age of 65. Or if you just look at how poverty has dropped in the elderly communities, according to the Bureau of Census, you can see that Social Security has become more than just a pension program. So there's something to be said for a government program that can actually successfully change, improve, and help the lives of that many people, let alone those not in poverty who still rely on the program for a majority of their monthly finances. So politically, it is much, much, much more palatable to push the hard decisions down the road until the program is not sustainable, which is kind of what the Democrats are hoping to do. So look, there's only a few days left before the election, and if you are inclined, you should go vote. Don't forget to vote. But I have a sinking suspicion that both sides of the spectrum, both Democrats and Republicans, kind of have their hands tied by each other. In fact, the only way that we could really truly make the necessary changes to the Social Security as well as the Medicare programs is for them to work together to do it. They would have to take the slings and arrows that they would definitely get for making those necessary but painful changes to ensure that generations to come, not just mine, but future generations as well, will be able to enjoy the fruits of the trees that were planted by our forebears. But at the moment, nobody is doing that at all. They're just hurling accusations back and forth at each other with the hope of winning political points and ultimately the midterm election. So realistically, I don't know who's going to win this midterm elections or how it's going to affect presidential elections to come. But what I can tell you is if both sides refuse to work with each other for political reasons, they are going to end up sacrificing the needs and the lives of millions of American people for the foreseeable future just to stay in power. Sad. All right, so that's it for today, and I hope that you enjoyed this video, or at least you found it interesting or helpful or maybe even useful. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when my newest and most informative videos come out. So for Michael's Matters, I'm Michael, hoping that you take care of yourself, take care of others, and have a happy, healthy